Good morning, Hallowed family. This is After Dawn, the show where we sit down and have a cup of coffee with the cast, crew, and creators behind Hallowed Studios. I'm Scott, and today I'm joined with my co-host, Saul. Hello, Saul.
Good morning. I'm Saul, and today we are talking about Scion Apotheosis, Episode 2. An episode which was a lot less intense than the first episode, a little more focused on the characters and their new introduction into the world of being Scions. Our intrepid adventurers, Kris, finding out that he is going to be adopted as a Scion of Artemis because his papa isn't around anymore. And joining us today to talk about this are, Damien and Zoe.
Hello, guys. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, it was an interesting episode. It was a lot less intense. No one died this time. But I think we had a lot of cool character stuff. So let's talk about that. Damien, when you started this episode, or, in general, what was your plans for Kris when you were, getting ready for this?
Well, apart from creating the basic sort of bare bones of the character and having an idea of exactly what I wanted to do with regards to his immediate personality, I kind of left the rest as a complete blank slate so that I could just go with whatever the storyteller threw at us, basically.
Very good. Yeah, it went pretty well. I think everyone did a good job of reacting to what the storytellers were saying. Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I think we were put in a very unique situation in the first episode, and having that death really kind of, certainly at least for me, brought home exactly the stakes that we were playing for, and it certainly brought me closer to the people that were there at the time that Teddy died as well. So it made it a lot more interesting, I think, for me when I was trying to build my character after episode 1 and kind of move him forwards and find a direction for him.
Zoe, you're we all know that you're a talented role player and you're also a talented SPC. But if you didn't realize, the chat really loved how well you did Artemis. Did you do any special preparations for that, or did you just naturally fall into being a Greek goddess?
Oh, what a question. Did not naturally fall into a Greek goddess role. I did a lot of research on the goddess herself. I actually kind of every time there was an episode or a session 0 or something like that, I was listening to Damien and what Damien was saying, and I read all of Damien's little, we have journals and stuff like that in most of our productions. Read all of those. I was paying, very close attention to what was happening around me and how Artemis would react to that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I did have some help from BP in regards to the Scion representation of Artemis, because I don't know if you know this, but in actual representation, Artemis is a child of Zeus and a Titan, which in Scion they don't address that apparently, but it would be interesting if that came out.
Yeah, it would.
I was personally really impressed by the fact that you played off Artemis coming in so easily, speaking to Kris so easily. One would expect there to be awkwardness when it comes to this, especially not just a parent meeting their child properly for the first time, but meeting someone else's child and trying to come off as warmer, as kind as possible with someone else that, in a very loose sense, doesn't belong to you. How did that sort of play into how you wanted to approach it?
Well, that's part of the intrinsic issue with Artemis, is she's one of the Greek virgin goddesses. She's never taken a husband. She's never had children of her own. I imagine that manifests in a way when she can make a deal or find a scion that she can adopt, it's very special to her, and that's where that warmth comes from. Like, this is now my kid. And she embraces that wholly. Doesn't happen that often. It's like once in a blue moon.
For sure. I mean, that whole, like, watching all of that sequence play out was pretty cool. It was one of the few. I had some trouble watching this because I was at work, but that was one of the bits that I got to like listen to the whole thing, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, oh man, I missed the other ones. I hope they're all as good. In which case, this episode rocked.
Mm-hmm.
But you, so you guys are good at that sort of thing. You're both advanced role players, as it were. Do you have any like ways that you get into characters so that you can come off warm and stuff when you're meeting up cold like that in a show?
I assume this question's still for me. I would be interested
It's
in
actually
hearing...
for both of you, actually.
Oh,
Both of
okay.
you. Yeah.
Damien, I want to hear yours first because I am curious.
Well, I mean, I am a professional actor by trade, so I do that quite a lot. I do have methods that I use to get into character and find my feet, as it were. And the way that I normally do it, and this is going to sound weird, is I find the walk. I find the character's walk. And once I've got the character's walk, that allows me to embody the character a little bit more, because from the walk, I learn how they stand, and then I learn how they sit. And that gives me an idea of how the character inhabits their own body. And from that point, I really have the character down. That comes from learning a long, long time ago that Robert De Niro needs to find the perfect pair of shoes. And once he's found the right shoes, then he can get into character. And that was quite profound for me in my young actor career at the time. And I just extrapolated from that, and I just found what worked for me, and that is walking. So that's how I get into character before every performance, whatever I do, whether it be stage, screen, even voice work, I walk as the character.
Wow.
That's very cool, and I never would have thought of that.
No. That is very cool. What about you, Zoe?
Okay. Well, on episode 2 of Scion, I was kind of just vibing for the most part. This explains a little bit of the how the pudding is made for Hallowed Haven Studios, but all like 8 or 9 of us were inside a Discord chat just kind of talking, and I think it was Sticker who said, "This Coda playlist is awesome." And I went, "Oh right, I made an Artemis playlist." And I went and started listening to that, and I kind of got reminded that I curated this playlist to match kind of Damien in a lot of ways. So Damien and Artemis were kind of 2 sides of the same coin at that point. And that kind of got me into the mood of what was going to happen tonight. Like, I knew I was going to appear last. And that was so painful because I'm sitting there like, I wanted to go now, but I can't because there's an order to this. But that kind of prepared me a little bit. I did a little bit of surface level like refresher on the goddess as well before we started. Just stuff like that.
That makes sense. I think that those are both really solid rituals to start off with, especially with someone as storied as Artemis and someone as fresh to this entire thing and to your role playing as Kris. Speaking of, how do you think it's going so far with Kris? Damien, do you like him as a character? Do you find it easier or harder to get into character with someone like this?
I mean, I've been doing this for long enough now that getting into character is something that I find relatively easy to do. And I never create characters that I dislike. I always try and go in with a premise and an idea of something that I think is going to be fun for me to play. I think that where Kris is at the moment, he is somewhat dumbstruck. He's a little bit confounded about everything that's going on. And he's really just kind of walking through the last couple of days, just nodding and smiling and nodding and going, okay, because he doesn't really understand the gravity of the situation, exactly what's going on. And he's trying to piece things together in that punch drunk way that I think he's feeling at the moment.
Yeah.
Especially after realizing that there's so many myths that he grew up learning, and it's all true.
Right. Right. I mean, exactly. He's very much into the Norse mythology, and he knows quite a bit about some of the others, well, a little bit about Greek and stuff like that. So he's not going into this completely blind, but finding out that it is all true has knocked him for six a little bit. It's shaken his confidence, and he's withdrawn a little bit in himself, and now he's just trying to accept what's happened and unravel what's happened and work out where he fits in this new world and this new situation. And that's where I'm at the moment with him. So that's why he's going along with things a lot more readily than maybe he would do otherwise.
Yeah. And since we're talking about Scion and mythology, this is a question actually for both of you. Do you have like a favorite mythological story as people?
I'll let you go first, Zoe.
Sure. Favorite mythological story. If we're talking about like modern media, The Prince of Egypt is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. Whether or not you consider that to be myth, that's a personal choice. I do. However, I did when I was growing up. I read a lot of stories about Anansi, which is kind of strange because I'm from Canada. Like, it's not. I'm so far removed from Africa, but Anansi stories are always really, really compelling to me.
I think for me, my favorite is the myth of Baba Yaga, her hot on chicken's legs, and all of that sort of story as well. I'm a big fan of the classical composer Mussorgsky, and he has a beautiful bit of music called The Hut on Chicken's Legs, Baba Yaga. And that is where I first heard about this. And I did some digging into it and realized that there was actually an advanced Dungeons and Dragons scenario about this exact subject, which I have and played back in the 80s, which I picked up as well. So I managed to weave in this Slavic mythological story about Baba Yaga into my role-playing games. And that's exactly how myths propagate. That's how they have such longevity, is because they're adapted and they're brought into the current cultural norms, storytelling, and so on, as society kind of moves forwards. And that's how myths stay relevant and adapt. And I thought that whoever made this hut on chicken's legs Baba Yaga story for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was incredibly clever. And so, yeah, I got into it that way.
That's actually super cool. I don't know the module you're talking about, but now I want to play it. But that's the same kind of thing. That's the same kind of thing, right? Like Call of Cthulhu won an award from like the H.P. Lovecraft Society because Call of Cthulhu single-handedly kept H.P. Lovecraft relevant through like the 80s and 90s and stuff. So yeah, that's definitely, you're right. That's definitely how we continue to propagate these myths, and then they turn into TV shows, and then they get new media, and everyone gets to hear about them again. So It's very cool.
Also, Baba Yaga, an excellent choice.
Yes, a very excellent choice. So in that same vein of these things, sorry, I don't mean to be jumping over Solomon constantly, but there's this question that I was sort of thinking about. Like, we're talking about Artemis and Damien, to Kris, sorry, I was trying to think of your character's name, today. And like, I was wondering if either of you, in that same vein of like these kinds of things, if either of you tried archery, and if so, what would you say your skill level was, being that that's something that's connected to Artemis?
Yes. Skill level awful. To elaborate on the story, when I was a kid, I was offered a very simple recurve bow. Like, it was plastic. When you put it away, you took the string off, and you could just recurve, like, put the string back on the next day. Very simple. Did not get far with it, though.
I think I started off about the age of 7 with a plastic longbow, and I moved on to a compound bow in my late teens, and I still got probably 3 or 4 bows back in the UK. And yeah, I've been doing archery since I was an early teen, like properly. At one point I'm okay. I'm not going to say I'm world class or anything, but I was moderately competitive. I used to take part in a few archery competitions when I used to do Renaissance fairs and things like that, because I'm also a stunt actor as well. I'm a sword fighter. I've been sword fighting for 40 years and all that sorts of things. So I would take part in demonstrations for archery just as much as I would for sword fighting in the Renaissance fairs in actual real castles back in the UK.
That's super cool. If I may elaborate on that, I have actually used a compound bow as well as I got older, but my feebly muscles did not want to pull it back as easily as the other bow, so it was hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie, compound bows are difficult.
Mm-hmm. I barely passed as a Boy Scout for the merit badge for archery, and somehow I thought that meant I qualified for a compound bow. And then I became the owner of one up until a few years ago when I finally sold it to somebody, because I was like, I don't think I've ever actually used this thing.
I personally was just used archery when I was in Boy Scouts, and that was literally just basically a couple of years when I would go to various camping trips, and then summer camp when I was getting into my teens, and then never again.
Yeah.
I love that out of all of us, though, Damien is the only one with like some concrete skill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He would be the one that had a classification of skill, whilst the rest of us are like, whatever you consider the lowest possible level, that's where we are. Do you want to ask another question, Saul?
I actually do have another question. I was wondering, this is actually something for Zoe. Artemis has a lot of stories around her. Are there any stories about her that she especially likes, or is there maybe a story that she really despises how it's managed to be translated into the modern day? Like when people think of it, they think of this, and she despises that?
Oh gosh. I imagine she would really revel in the stories where she gets vengeance on someone for something. I did a little bit of thinking about this, but this is less to do with the story and more like she's still pissed off her temple was burned down.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of like the lore about her is she is unpredictable, and she is like nature itself. She is an allegory for nature itself. So there's that kind of fickle rage to her.
Fair enough. So she probably doesn't think too much on what people may be taking offense to her turning a man into a deer and having his own dogs hunt him down.
That one's hilarious. That's a knee slapper for her.
That's funny. A knee slapper.
What has been fun is while I've been kind of developing this character, I have brought up a whole bunch of news stories, and mostly it has to do with her and her brother Apollo, which is exciting. But they are a disaster team, not to be underestimated.
We'll get into that because I have a question about that. Actually, it's a question for Kris, but not right at the moment. We're gonna move into now that we've got everyone percolating. Damien, how do you think Kris feels about being drafted into this like war thing?
At the moment, I think all he wants to do is be a musician. So that's where his passion lies. So the fact that he's been pulled away from that, I think he resents a little bit. I'm not going to lie. He does resent it. But I don't think he's really fully embraced everything that's happened to him at the moment. He still kind of thinks that maybe this is a dream or a mistake, or it'll be a short-term thing, or it'll just blow over shortly and he can go back to his music life. So I don't think he's fully grasped the ramifications of exactly what's happened to him at the moment.
I mean,
I don't think anyone would be able to fully grasp everything that's happened in such a short amount of time.
Right.
That's what I was going to say too. Yeah.
So I think when that finally lands, when he really does come to Earth and appreciate everything, because, at the moment Artemis has come to him in a dream. It's a dream. And we all know that dreams can get pretty screwed up. You can dream the weirdest, most wonderful things. So I think if Artemis had come to him in person, he would be more upset. We'd rail against it a little bit more. But the fact that it was a dream, he can still remember it afterwards. But hey, you can remember dreams. It's still not sunk in yet. There's still a lot cotton wool fuzziness in his brain.
Mm-hmm. A tad surreal.
Yeah, very.
On the plus side, when he does adhere to it, he can become like a modern skald, actually fighting and singing.
True, very true. And I think, he will have to come to terms with those sorts of things. He'll try and have to find out how he can reconcile his music career with this new life that he's got. Now, he does kind of like the idea of being a hunter. And at the very end of the episode, I think I mentioned that while he was out on the doorstep, sort of hunkered down, smoking a cigarette, he was actually coming up with new song lyrics in his head. And I was actually coming up with some song lyrics at the very end of that session, and it was all to do with hunting. So I think that's where he's going to get the acceptance, is going to be through this connection with hunting, weirdly.
Very cool.
That is very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that play itself out in the next sessions. So I did have a question for you. Did you design this dream sequence meeting with Kris and Artemis? If so, where did you get the idea?
I did, actually. Where did I get the idea? My brain is an enigma mishmash of ideas at any given time, which is part of the thing I do is I need to get something out. So I will write it or I will run it if in the case of a TRPG. If I don't get it out, it's just going to rattle around in there. So luckily that one day I was just inspired and I wrote it out in my channel for Artemis, and BP was like, I love it, but I'm going to change it a little bit so it's easier for me to relay to the audience. And I'm like, that's fine. But yeah, that was kind of the inspiration, I guess, what kind of happened there.
So did everyone else get to design their meetings as well, or was it just you?
I thought it was the thing we had to do. I was under the impression that we needed to figure that kind of thing out, and apparently I was the only one that did it, which is fine. It wasn't a requirement, and I just went and did it.
So we find now that you're an overachiever. Got it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that.
They just had to show their superiority to everyone. It's fine.
No, goodness, no.
So I have a question about Artemis. What is her particular role when it comes to the Titans? Being a huntress, I imagine that it would be a lot more dangerous to be a huntress of Titan spawn specifically.
I imagine it's more tactical because she doesn't have the scions to kind of wage war. They would have to be smart, skilled, and curating their talents would be kind of the most important thing to do. That said, she would nowhere near the tactical nature of Athena. But she just doesn't have the numbers to, I don't know, pull an Odin and throw all the scions at a problem.
Pull an Odin, that's going to be a thing now.
It's also fairly accurate. I'd imagine it'd be very difficult to do that when the whole bit of your myth is that you don't have kids, or you don't have a husband or anyone that you call a companion in that sort of way. At least not a way that can bring you any children.
Then you look over to your brother, who is a walking man-whore, flying his flaming chariot across the sky, and you're just like, well, there's that.
That's true. That's going to be fun for the family reunion for Kris.
Well, now that you brought up the family reunion, Damien, do you think that are you excited to meet Uncle Dionysus? Do you think that Kris would be, or Uncle Apollo?
I mean, I think in a way, yeah. Although he does appreciate that he's adopted, so they're not his real family. He's just adopted, so he's never going to be a blood relative of them. And I think that will make Kris feel sad when he realizes that. Kris wants to belong. He got into music because he wanted to show off, I guess, but he wants to belong to something. And the fact that he doesn't really belong to this family, he's still an outsider, I think that rankles him a little bit. It's going to upset him, make him sad. So he definitely wants to meet Dionysius purely because Kris loves to drink. But I think it'll be tempered with a little bit of sadness.
That's pretty intense, actually.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it will.
This comes from a place of me knowing nothing, but I really hope they like embrace Kris fully. Like that would be the sweetest thing.
I don't imagine that Dionysus would be one to hold any sort of like grudges or any sort of ill feelings. I think he's pretty chill. Apollo, on the other hand,
we'll see. I can't speak more about that.
I think from Kris's perspective, if they don't embrace him, then he's just going to like have a Coke and a smile. It's like, okay, well, you weren't really my family in the first place. I don't really care. But again, he's got to get to the point where he's got rid of all of this cloudiness and he's accepted his fate, I think, before he will be able to do that.
Fair enough. On the plus side, Apollo is a god of music, so we might appreciate that bit at least.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I do agree with that.
So, I have a question for Damien. Apollo, you said earlier that Artemis does want Kris to be a hunter, and Kris is a little more okay with that. What does being a hunter mean to Kris?
That's a really good question. I think at the moment, Kris is seeing it more as a hunter for the truth. He's seeing it in kind of a little bit of a metaphysical sense rather than an actual physically hunting someone down, stalking them with a weapon and removing them. So again, I think that's born of the fact that Kris has lofty ideals regarding music and culture and things like that, and he sees everything very metaphysically, metaphorically, rather than in actual real terms. He's a bit of a dreamer, so he's seeing what is the cool version of being a hunter. He's a seeker after truth. He's a hunter of truth, when that might not actually be the case. He might be a literal hunter.
I mean, those both can apply.
Right.
But yeah, I think that it might throw him off to find out that, oh, well, hunter of truth, that's okay and all, but can you actually hunt something now, please?
Right. And I think, again, he will have to take a long, hard look at himself and sit down once everything lands and he accepts his new future and his new fate. Then he will probably understand things a little bit better and throw himself into the actual literal hunting rather than, being a seeker of truth.
It sounds like you've got a lot of like character development like coming down the pipe here.
I hope so. I mean, I love games where I can do that. I mean, my favorite movies are where the character has a big story arc from the start to the end of the movie. Movies like Phone Booth with Colin Farrell, where it's not about showy set pieces. It's all about the character's journey from the start to the finish. That's what gets me on stage or in front of a camera. And that's what I love about tabletop role-playing games, and that's what drew me to the World of Darkness back in the early 90s, was that the whole kind of woe is me storylines that pretty much all of these systems have in common.
I didn't expect to hear a reference to the phone booth, but I love that movie, actually.
It's a fab movie. It's a brilliant Colin Farrell movie. It really is.
Yeah. So I have since we're bringing up the development, and especially development alongside Artemis, did you have any inclination of who your divine parent would be? And with Kris's design, he is designed to be very Norse, very intensely following the myths, having the Mjolnir pendant and doing a prayer to Loki in the first episode. Did you have any idea that it would be sort of a bait and switch type of situation?
Oh, I mean, I went in, I thought, if I'm going to be leaning really, really heavily into Norse, knowing BP, she's probably not going to give me a Norse background because that would be too obvious. So I wasn't actually expecting any kind of Norse parentage at all. I gave her a list of the ones that I wasn't interested in, and I was very, very curious to see where she was going to go with it. So, yeah.
Out of curiosity, which ones weren't you super interested in, if I may ask?
I wasn't interested in the Abrahamic religions or a lot of the current real-world religion bases. There are a few others in there as well, but I wasn't interested in those ones. I wanted one that was from mythology from a long time back.
So no Prince of Egypt for you.
Right.
Ah, man. No, once again, proving that BP is one of the best storytellers out there because she knows how to do that right.
Yeah, she did a really good job, actually. And I think it surprised me in a good way that she did technically give me a Norse parentage with Loki, but he was an absentee father, and so therefore I was being picked up by someone else. And what Damien understood, but Kris hasn't fully grasped yet, was that I was the only character that actually had both parents. Every other character was an orphan in real life, air quotes.
Right.
Whereas with the Pantheons, I was the only character who was an orphan and everybody else had a parent. And I thought, Damien thought that was excellent. That was a really, really lovely twist. And well played to BP. That was incredible.
Thumbs up to her. I always like to throw a thumbs up to her in these things so she can listen to them and be like, "Aw," because she does a great job.
Yeah, she did a fantastic job in this. Yeah.
Zoe, can you tell us what Artemis is most proud of with her adopted son, Kris? It's a hard question.
Such a hard question. This is going to sound really cruel, but nothing yet.
And that's fair. No, that's not cool at all because I haven't done anything. So, yeah.
She does love, because in the Scion universe, Artemis actually had a small stint as a rock star. She loves that part of Kris, that he was once trying to find his way musically. And I don't know if this, is this spoilery? Can I say this?
I don't know.
Can you?
Oh gosh.
Do you have to reference the SBC chat to find out?
No, I don't. When she said, I'm going to be very vague about this. I'm going to be vague for you guys. I'm going to be vague for all the people listening. Mm-hmm. When she said, I want to see your conviction as a hunter, it was not just with a bow and arrow and hunting prey. It was not.
Ooh, I think we've started spilling the tea already.
Yeah, that's a little tea.
Well, let's just get into it then. Spill some tea there. Damien, do you have any response to that? This is the time where you guys can talk to each other, ask each other questions.
No, I mean, I don't have any real response to that, but I will say that Kris was disappointed that he didn't have an actual Norse parent who was there and that he could be proud of and shout from the rooftops. And in a way, he kind of feels like a bit of a failure because someone has basically had to adopt him. Otherwise, he's probably going to die. So Kris is kind of feeling that maybe Artemis drew the short straw and she's the one who's got to adopt him. And he's got to they've both got to make the best of something that they, isn't really optimal. But again, that's how he feels at the moment. How that's going to pan out once he really understands his situation is, I don't know yet.
Would he have been excited to have had a Norse parent if it was Loki? If Loki had come to greet him?
I think, yeah, he would, purely because that lends credence to his upbringing. He's been into Norse mythology ever since he was a child. His band is called Bloodstrom, which means bloodstream. His surname is Strom anyway. So he has been embroiled in Norse mythology. So I think he would have been happy with any Norse parent who was actually there. And the fact that it's Artemis, he knows a little bit about Artemis, not a tremendous amount. He knows that she's the goddess of the hunt, amongst other things. So that's good. He likes that, but he still feels that maybe she picked him out of pity because he doesn't have a parent. And if she didn't pick him, he'd probably die. So he does feel very insecure about the whole thing at the moment. But again, it was a dream. So he's still trying to piece together, hey, dreams aren't real, right?
I'm not gonna comment too much on that. I loved all of it, but I really hope we get a moment for Artemis and Kris to sit down and actually face to face this time, not in a dream. The reason I was so into it being dream was because time was of the essence. There was a lot of cogs happening, and she had to adopt him quickly before something bad happened, and it was just more convenient.
Draw the short straw.
Did she draw the short straw? I don't think so.
But then, you said the fact, she's got to adopt him quickly before everything hits the fan is exactly how Kris feels as well, that she had to adopt him quickly. Someone had to adopt me quickly, because if they didn't, I'm probably going to die in a very short space of time, because it had been drummed into us by Nat and everybody from the moment we'd met all of the other Scions that if we don't get adopted, if we don't meet our parents and learn our abilities, we are going to die. If we want to go alone, if we want to turn around to them and say no, then we're going to be dead within a week. So Kris, fully cognizant of that, was basically going to accept pretty much the first thing that came along just so he didn't die. But he does feel like he has an awful lot to prove to be worthy to an adopted parent. There is no bond of blood there. So he's got to be even more worthy to get the approval of an adopted parent than he would from a blood parent.
It's so sad when you say it like that, but yeah, I can see that frame of mind, and I can only hope we do have that moment where they can actually talk on a little more interpersonal level.
Yeah, that would be good.
Well, sorry, go
I
ahead.
I have a sort of a follow-up question about the whole having a Norse parent. Did Kris have a preference for what parent he had? Would it have been Thor, given that he had a Mjolnir pendant?
Yeah, it probably would have been Thor, with Odin as a very close second.
And so then why did he just throw away his connection to the Aesir with relative ease?
But see, in his mind, he hasn't really thrown away a connection to the Aesir because they've always been a part of him. This is an adopted parent. This is not a blood parent. This is an adopted parent. So he's not thrown away a connection. What he's actually done is he's appeased an adopted connection by going, hey, look, I've thrown away my Mjolnir pendant. He hasn't thrown it away. It's in the corner of his room. He now has it wrapped around his left fist, and he's got the fox pendant around his neck. So he was basically like a wounded animal who rolled over onto their back so that their stomach was exposed to prove that they weren't a threat. He was like, this is what I have to do in order to stay alive. So that's what he did. But he hasn't thrown away his connections by any means whatsoever.
This is a lot of tea to be taken in.
I agree.
No, yeah, this is very good. Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that people wanted to know. Like I wanted to know, but lots of people want to know that as well. So based on that, how do you think Artemis feels about that whole acceptance business that just happened?
Goodness. She loves that Kris was so ready to accept her parentage. It's complicated because like it does sadden her a little bit to see his devotion to the Aesir and for the Aesir to not accept him. That hurts. Him throwing away the pendant, it didn't affect her so much, but she was just like, that's part of you. I would prefer that you keep it, and I think she said as much at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. She definitely said it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what I said to you in response. In all honesty, I really can't. I was kind of in the zone at that point, but I definitely knew where I was going with it. It wasn't just like an off-the-cuff thing that I did. I had a definite idea for the character of what that meant for him by seemingly symbolically throwing away that pendant.
Yeah. It was a very touching scene altogether. I think I actually got misty-eyed because, like, I was in the zone. I was very much in the Artemis space, and it was touching that he was, like, just accepting of her.
It seems like a lot of people were getting misty-eyed. A lot of our watchers really felt that deeper connection beginning to form between the two of them. The emotions were very heavy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and being in the zone too, like that's a really good place to be as a player, right? And you do things in that space that you don't even think of. I mean, I did it when I gave the speech as Arthur at the first episode of Wayfarer. You just get in that zone, you just say things, which leads me actually to a question about when Damien, when you did that prayer over Teddy. Did you just come up with that on the fly, or did you rehearse that?
That I knew, so I already had it kind of on the back burner.
Well, it was excellently executed, and I was like, "Wow, that like if that was a zone moment, geez, that was great."
I mean, it fit the situation, and I wanted to do something poignant, I suppose, but I also wanted to really kind of lean in heavily to the Norse mythology. So, and it did fit. And it was funny that it was a prayer to Hel, the daughter of Loki, as well. So that's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wrote down all of that when it was happening because I wanted to make sure I had it in my pocket in case Kris got a little uppity during his visitation.
Fair. I mean, I wasn't sure how our meeting was going to go. I don't really ever go into sessions like this with preconceived ideas of how I'm going to play the character, just like I don't go on set with preconceived other ideas of how I'm going to play the character. I always bounce off the person opposite me, and whatever they give me is what I take and I roll with. And that just seemed like the right thing to do at the time, which is why I don't think I was unpleasant to you. I very much bounced off the sort of the energy, the vibe that you gave me.
Mm-hmm. No, I thought it was great. I adored it.
But one thing I will say is I felt Kris felt like a wounded animal when he was meeting you. He felt like that you were the huntress and that he has to roll over and show his belly, like I said earlier, so that the hunter didn't kill him. He's got to show subservience. And I did feel that going into that meeting very, very much as Kris. And that was the energy that I kind of had, which is why I so readily accepted everything.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. During that whole thing, Artemis did refer to Kris as the Fox. It's a nickname that's going to stick. Because She feels as though during hunts, like fancy hunts, the foxes, usually horribly outnumbered by hunters on horses and whatnot. She kind of went into this a little bit. She does consider Damien right now to be, or not Damien, I'm so sorry, Kris right now to be the fox. And a wounded animal, yeah, probably. But that's why she's here to, like, train you and teach you. Funny, as I wanted to mention this earlier when I was talking about being misty-eyed, BP has legitimately made me cry once during a game that she was running. So kudos to her for that.
Yeah, she's really good at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I
It was a
actually
good
have
cry, though.
Fair enough. I have a question for Damien, kind of going along with the whole bit about Teddy. He came in as a ghost in episode 2, but his first appearance was not to Kris; it was to Oliver.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. How's Kris feeling that he didn't get to see him first?
Oh, no, Kris is fine by that because Oliver was the one who had the most interaction with Teddy. Oliver's the one that Teddy entrusted his phone to. So he's completely fine with that. I think what Kris is more worried about is that on top of all of this, ghosts are real too. So it's just an extra layer of supernatural existence that he previously didn't think existed, along with werewolves and gods and ghosts and everything else. So
Have some connection issues on your end, Damien.
Oh, do I?
Oh, it's cleared up.
Clear now.
It just suddenly cleared up. Amazing.
Yeah,
well, I caught what you were saying. It was very robotic, but I caught what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Same. Oh, it's perfectly fine.
It's fine. The internet's a thing that we all deal with all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything I need to clarify?
I mean, do you want to do the whole thing again? Take 2. No, just that's up to you.
I mean, did you understand it, or would it be better for me to do it again? Okay.
I mean, I think so. I think you were essentially saying that, like, that this whole thing it just shows what could happen if you don't, like, have the parentage, you don't follow the deal. Yeah. So you had to, that was the reason why you accepted Artemis, because you knew that this was the outcome of not doing it. Right.
Right. He saw what happened to somebody who hadn't fully realized his potential yet, hadn't been accepted by somebody. So he thought, well, I've got to take the first thing that comes along, otherwise I'm going to die, because he's seen it happen.
Right. It happened right in front of him.
Right.
So, Zoe, since you have the power of a goddess, is there something you would change in this campaign, and why? It's a hard question.
What a question. I do not have a character sheet.
Okay.
So there's that. I'm
It
not
means
sure.
you can't die.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
I literally can't affect the world. What would Artemis change given the situation at current? Probably nothing. Like, we're talking about a goddess that represents nature. Someone dying is part of nature. As tragic as it is, would she have intervened for Teddy? No. If Kris decides to do something exceptionally stupid and die from it, I'm not sure if she would intervene unless it was something that she was responsible for. Like, that sounds cruel, but it is nature. Like, she will love and care for Kris as much as she can, but she can't protect him from everything.
Also goes to show the difference between mortal parentage versus having divine parents who have so many others they have to worry about too.
Ooh.
I don't have that many others, but it's still like it's a very much that balance of life and death with Artemis. Also, if she was really upset about it, she could always just go to Hades and be like, "Hey, release my Scion, please."
That's very
I'm
true.
here for my kid. I'm here to pick up my kid.
Yeah. Let me through. Everyone step aside.
Take a number.
is there anything that either of you would be really disappointed if you never got to experience in this campaign?
Oh, what a question. I mean, I think for me, I like songs of grace and redemption. So I like to be able to have that character arc where I can take myself from, A to Z in a really meaningful way. And I think I would be sorry if I didn't get some of that. But I know the way that BP works, so I think I'm safe.
And that's when she gets you.
Yeah,
that's when she gets you.
Yep. Twist.
On my end, I have a lot of weird slice of life things I would like to do with Kris. Granted, I'm not a player, right? I don't have an overarching story. At least I don't think so. It has not been revealed to me. But I would like to influence my Scion's life in positive ways and see that growth. That's the most interesting arc for Artemis, is to see that growth with Kris.
That's interesting. I think in light of that, Kris, from a character perspective, would very much want to be accepted by Artemis as an actual son rather than an adopted son. And I know that's never really going to happen because it can't, but I think he does want to do you proud in whatever way he can. Certainly that's how he feels at the moment.
The heartstrings. I want to say that you're going to be a little more surprised on her reaction to that kind of statement if you if Kris ever asked.
Spoilers.
He probably wouldn't ask. He wouldn't ask because he doesn't know the answer he's going to get, and he might be afraid of some of the answer that he's going to get.
Mm-hmm. Well, then we may never know.
We may never know.
Gasp.
So much tea. Got to start cleaning up.
Right.
Well, Solomon, do you have any more questions to ask these two?
I actually do have one that's kind of digs a little more into the bones of how you came about Kris, Damien. You and I were in a game last year, Chicago Reborn.
Yeah.
And you played Charles Fletcher. I personally, when I first saw the design for Kris and saw and listened to him talk and how he spoke to people, I saw that there were a few similarities between the two, but there were, of course, very distinct differences in that Kris is much more personable than Charles was. Did they sort of come from similar with places from how you design characters, but with just those key little differences, or do you think that there's a little more difference to them than there is similarity?
I think there's a lot more difference to them than there is similarity, but I will temper that by saying, again, as an actor, there is always a little bit of yourself in whatever you create, or whatever role you play, whatever character you create. There's always a little bit of yourself. So you always bring a little bit of your own real life truth to whatever character that you do. So there's always going to be some similarities, simple as that. But I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't want to play another character like Charles in this system. I wanted him to be noticeably different. So the two of them could be put side by side and people wouldn't go, oh, it's just Damien playing the same character again, but with a different name and a different accent. So I very purposefully wanted to make them distinct from each other.
So did the tone of the game being a little more high adventure than a vampire, did that sort of help to show you how you should differentiate them?
100%. Charles was a very down-to-earth character in a very, very gritty game. And whilst I don't doubt this game is going to be gritty, Kris is very much more of a high fantasy character, I think, in this world.
Just goes to show what all you can do with very slight differentiations, even with the same company making similar systems.
Yeah,
true.
I mean, we did talk about that in the other episode of After Dawn about how we have pieces of ourselves with us, and one of our players said that his character Teddy was a polar opposite of him, But when we started breaking that down, he started finding similarities between himself and Teddy. And it became pretty clear that is what you just said is exactly right. We all bring something to our characters. There's a piece of us in all of our characters, whether it's a role-playing character or an acting piece. There's always a piece of us in there.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. On that note of the previous episode, Damien, did you know that Gary said that you are too good looking and your voice is too good that you need to be off the show because you're making him look bad?
I did not know that. I don't know, too good looking. I mean, has he had his eyes checked recently?
Oh.
But I do admit I have a great voice. But then I am a voice actor, so I have to have a great voice.
Yeah,
it'd be kind of difficult to be a voice actor, but having a voice for print.
Right. As I think as I've been, somebody said to me laughingly, is that I've got the face for voice acting.
Oh my goodness. That's such a backhanded compliment.
Right.
Oh, ouch. But yeah, no, it was his all of his like trash on the other players was like complimentary. It was rough to get through because he was just like, that person, they're too good. I need them out.
The most amazing people.
How dare they be great?
Exactly. That's exactly what went down. Do either of you have any things about the other players you want to throw out there? Anything that you have thought of before we end this? Any thoughts? I'm super excited to see how everybody is going to develop over the next few weeks. I very much do think that even though we're second episode in, that we're still at the very, very start of this campaign. We're still finding our feet. And I really want to see, where Sarah goes as a gun-toting lawyer. I'm super intrigued by that one because it could go anywhere. I think that one. The other characters too, but I don't know. That one just piques my curiosity a little bit more.
Is it because she actually is part of the Norse pantheon?
I mean, in a way, yeah, but I just love the fact that she's this gung-ho, gun-toting lawyer who got right up close and personal with the werewolves and like shoved the gun in and pulled the trigger. That I love everything about that. So I want to see very much where Sarah develops over the next few weeks.
Fair enough.
Very good.
I absolutely adore everyone. I want to see what the Scions do with their newfound gifts, how they approach the upcoming challenges, whatever those may be. I also want to say that the disaster team that is the the gods, like the SPCs playing all the parents, they've been absolutely hilarious this whole time. So there's that.
Just a plug to try to get in on the SPC crew, which patrons can do, right?
They can. They can do a bunch of other stuff too, and affect the show in multiple ways. So be sure to check that out when it arrives.
Yep. And so with that, we will talk to the Patreons because we're going to end this episode. These episodes of After Dawn drop every Thursday at noon if you're a $5 tier or above. They're released to the public 1 month later. So if you were listening to this a month after we recorded it, think about subscribing so you can get in on this whole SPC action and get your talk news when it's up to date rather than a month after the fact. And that's it, everyone. Thanks for joining us, guys. This was really good. I enjoyed this.
I had a really great time.
It's most enjoyable.
It felt good sitting and talking with Damien, because up until now I've been kind of like silently in the distance watching.
I would just like to say, Beige Squad assemble, because that's important.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to say goodbye now. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.